The great hall of the galactic conclave stretched for miles in every direction. Its ceiling soared so high that clouds formed near the apex, and the walls were crafted from living crystal, pulsing with a soft blue light. This was the heart of the Valoran Dominion, the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. For 10,000 years, the Valorans had conquered world after world, subjugating hundreds of species under their iron grip. No one had ever stopped them. No one had even come close. Supreme Commander Seer stood in the center of the hall, his tall, gray body clad in ceremonial armor of conquest. He was the greatest military mind of his generation, responsible for the annexation of 37 worlds into the Dominion. His 4 eyes scanned the assembled council members with thinly veiled contempt. These old fools spent their days in debate and discussion, while warriors like him did the actual work of expanding the empire. Council members, Seer began, his voice echoing across the vast space. I stand before you today to present our next target for annexation, a small world in the outer spiral arm of the galaxy. The locals call it Earth. He waved a clawed hand, and a holographic image of a blue-green planet appeared above him. It was beautiful in its own way, covered mostly in water with patches of brown and green land. White clouds swirled across its surface. As you can see, Earth is a primitive world. The dominant species calls itself humans. They have only recently developed the technology to leave their planet, and even then, they have only managed to reach their single moon. Their fastest ships would take years to reach the nearest star. In terms of technology, they are infants. Seer smiled, revealing his sharp teeth. What is even better, these humans are deeply divided. They have organized themselves into hundreds of separate nations that are constantly at war with one another. They argue over resources, over beliefs, over scraps of land. They have even developed weapons capable of destroying their own cities and have come close to using them against each other several times. Laughter rippled through the council chamber. The idea of a species warring with itself amused the Valorans. They had long since united under a single ruler and could not comprehend why any intelligent race would waste energy on internal conflicts. Their weapons are primitive, Seer continued. They still use chemical propulsion and explosive projectiles. Their most advanced ships are made of simple metals. They have no energy shields, no faster-than-light travel, no plasma weaponry. Conquering them will be like taking food from a sleeping child. He paused for effect, letting his confidence fill the room. I request permission to lead a fleet of 500 ships to Earth. Within 1 month, the planet will be ours. We will gain access to their resources, their labor force, and their strategic position in this sector of space. Council members nodded to one another. It seemed a simple matter, another easy conquest for the ever-expanding Dominion. But then, a voice rang out from the shadows at the edge of the hall. I must object. Everyone turned. Out of the darkness stepped a figure that made even Seer feel a flicker of unease. It was Elder Chaos, the ancient archivist of the Dominion. No one knew exactly how old Chaos was. Some said he was alive when the Dominion was first founded. His body was stooped and withered, gray skin hanging loosely on his bones, but his eyes were sharp and clear, holding knowledge accumulated over centuries. Chaos walked slowly toward the center of the hall. His staff tapped against the crystal floor with every step. The council members shifted uncomfortably. The elder rarely attended these meetings, and when he did, it was never a good sign. Elder Chaos, said the head of the council, an elderly Valoran woman who led the governing body. You wish to speak against this conquest? Yes, Chaos said, his voice dry but steady. I have come to warn you. Do not attack Earth. Do not provoke the humans. Seer laughed loudly. With respect, Elder, have you seen the data? These creatures can barely reach their own moon. What possible threat could they pose to 500 Valoran warships? Chaos turned his ancient eyes toward the Supreme Commander. There was something in that gaze that made Seer's laughter die in his throat. I have spent my life studying the records of this galaxy, Chaos said slowly. I have read the histories of 10,000 civilizations. I have studied the remains of species that appeared and vanished long before the Dominion existed, and in all my research, there is one warning that appears again and again. He raised his staff and struck it against the floor. The sound rang through the hall like a bell. Do not wake the humans. Silence descended on the council. Seer felt a chill run down his spine, though he would never have admitted it. What do you mean? Asked the head of the council. Chaos walked to the holographic display and waved his hand. The image of Earth vanished, replaced by ancient documents, star maps, and fragments of alien writing. "These are records I have collected over the centuries," he explained. "They come from species that no longer exist, civilizations that disappeared thousands of years ago, and many of them contain references to Earth and its inhabitants." He pointed to a fragment of alien text. "This is from the Catrani, a species that controlled much of this galaxy before the rise of the Dominion. They were powerful and advanced. Their empire lasted 50,000 years, and then, quite suddenly, they disappeared." "What happened to them?" asked a council member. "No one knows for sure, but in their final records, there is a reference to a blue world and a species of incredible fury. The Catrani wrote that they had made a terrible mistake, that they had awakened something that should have been left alone." Chaos displayed more records. The Varad Collective, the Zari Empire, the Children of the Burning Star, all of them, at different points in history, seemed to have crossed paths with Earth. All of them had left a warning, and all of them were now extinct. Seer stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. "These are fragments and legends, elder tales from dead civilizations. You cannot expect us to abandon a conquest because of ghost stories." Chaos turned to look at him directly. "Let me tell you what I have learned about the humans, Supreme Commander. They evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them. On their planet, there are ice ages that cover entire continents. There are predators with claws and teeth designed to tear flesh. There are diseases that can wipe out millions. The very earth shakes beneath them, and the mountains explode with fire." He paused, letting his words sink in. "And yet, the humans survived, not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most stubborn. They refused to die. When the cold came, they wrapped themselves in the skins of dead animals and built fires. When predators hunted them, they hunted the predators in return. When diseases struck, they learned to heal. When the earth shook, they rebuilt, again and again and again, for hundreds of thousands of years." Chaos stepped closer to Seer until they were face to face. "You see their internal conflicts as weakness. Supreme Commander, you believe that because they fight among themselves, they will be easy to conquer. But I see something else. I see a species that has practiced war throughout its entire existence. Every human living today is the descendant of warriors who survived conflict after conflict. War is not something they fear. It is something they understand better than any other species in this galaxy." Seer held the elder's gaze, not flinching. "And yet, they have never faced an enemy like us. Their primitive weapons cannot scratch our shields. Their tiny ships cannot challenge our fleet. Whatever threats they have met on their own world, they have never faced the Valoran Dominion." "That is exactly what worries me," Chaos said softly. "You are about to show the humans that there are threats beyond their world. You are about to give them a reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting you. You are about to unify them." He turned to address the entire council. "I have studied human psychology in great detail. They are a contradictory species. They can show great kindness and horrific cruelty. They create beautiful art and destructive weapons. They dream of peace and are constantly preparing for war. But there is one trait that defines them above all else." Chaos's voice turned somber. "When humans face extinction, they do not surrender. They do not negotiate. They do not admit defeat. Something in their very nature refuses to die. And when they decide to fight, truly fight, they become capable of things no other species in this galaxy can achieve." The head of the council leaned forward. "Such as?" "Sacrifice," Chaos said simply. "Other species fight for survival. Humans fight to ensure their enemies do not. They will burn their own cities if it means burning yours as well. They will poison their own land if it means denying it to invaders. They will send their children into battle, knowing they will not return, if it means their grandchildren can live free." He gestured toward the holographic display of Earth. "Right now, humans are warring with each other using weapons that can destroy cities in a single blast. They have thousands of these weapons aimed at each other, ready to fire at any moment. Think about that, Council. They would rather have the ability to destroy themselves than be defenseless. What does that tell you about their nature?" Seer scoffed. "It tells me they are insane," he said dismissively. "And insanity is no substitute for technology. Elder, I respect your knowledge, but you have been reading ancient texts for too long. Reality is simple. We have 500 warships with plasma cannons, energy shields, and faster-than-light drives. They have chemical rockets and explosive shells. This is not a war, it is pest control." Several council members muttered in approval. Chaos's warnings were interesting, but they could not outweigh the obvious facts. Earth was primitive. The Dominion was advanced. The outcome was inevitable. The head of the council called for a vote. Hands rose across the hall. The vote was overwhelming. The conquest was approved. The head of the council announced, "Supreme Commander Seer, you will lead the fleet to Earth. Bring this world into the Dominion." Seer bowed his head in agreement, a smug smile on his face. Kawa stood silent for a long time. Then he turned and walked toward the exit of the hall. His staff tapped slowly against the floor. "Elder Kaus," the head of the council shouted. "Do you have anything else to say?" Kaus stopped but did not turn around. "I will say only one thing," he replied. His voice carried across the vast hall. "In all my centuries of study, I have seen the same pattern repeat countless times. Powerful empires become arrogant. They believe their strength makes them invincible. And then they encounter something they do not understand, something that does not obey their rules, and they fall." He continued walking toward the exit. "The humans have a saying, 'Do not wake a sleeping dog.' It means some things are better left alone. You are about to disturb something that has been asleep for a very long time. When it wakes up, do not say I did not warn you." The great doors closed behind him, and Elder Chaos vanished into the shadows. Seer watched him, then turned back to the council with a confident expression. "The Elder means well, but he has become fearful in his old age. I will depart for Earth within the week. You will have a new colony within a month." The council members applauded. It would be a glorious conquest. They were sure of it. In his private quarters that night, Seer reviewed the intelligence reports on Earth once more. He studied the humans' primitive spacecraft, their simple weapons, their divided nations. Everything confirmed what he already knew. It would be the easiest conquest of his career. But as he drifted off to sleep, Chaos's words echoed in his mind. "They sacrifice." Seer brushed the thought away. It was madness. No species, no matter how stubborn, could stand against the Dominion. The humans would learn their place, like every other conquered race. He closed his eyes and dreamed of victory. Across the galaxy, on the small blue world, 8 billion humans lived their daily lives. They worked in offices and factories. They raised their children. They argued about politics and sports. They laughed and cried, loved and hated. They had no idea that a fleet of 500 warships was preparing to enslave or destroy them. But deep in secret facilities across the globe, in underground bunkers and classified laboratories, there were those who suspected that humanity was not alone in the universe. They had been preparing quietly and cautiously for the day they hoped would never come. When the stars dimmed with alien ships, humanity would not be entirely surprised. And when they learned what the invaders wanted, when they realized that surrender meant slavery or death, something very old and very dangerous would awaken in the hearts of 8 billion people. The Valoran Armada exited faster than light space, traveling just beyond Earth's moon. 500 warships, each the size of a small city, aligned in perfect formation. Their hulls gleamed with dark metal, and their weapons pulsed with barely contained energy. It was the largest fleet ever assembled for a single conquest, and Supreme Commander Seer stood in its center, staring down at the blue planet below. "Beautiful," he muttered to himself. "And soon, it will be ours." His deputy, a young officer named Verat, approached with a tablet. "Commander, our scans are complete. The planet has about 8 billion inhabitants. Their largest population centers are concentrated on the continental land masses. We have identified their primary military installations and communication networks." "And their defenses?" Seer asked. "Primitive, as expected. They have satellites in orbit, but nothing that can threaten our ships. Their ground weapons use chemical explosives and nuclear reactions powerful by their standards, but our shields can withstand anything they throw at us." Seer nodded, satisfied. "Begin the broadcast. Let them know their new masters have arrived." Valoran communication systems activated, simultaneously intercepting every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth. Across the planet, billions of people stopped as their screens flickered, and a terrifying image appeared. Seer's gray face filled the screens. His 4 eyes stared coldly at humanity. "People of Earth," he began, speaking through universal translators that broadcast his words in every human language. "I am Supreme Commander Seer of the Valoran Dominion. Your world is now under our control. Resistance is not only futile, but will lead to the total destruction of your species." He paused, letting the fear spread across the planet. "Our demands are simple. You will surrender unconditionally. You will provide tribute in the form of raw materials and resources, and you will provide 30% of your population for forced labor, conscription, and service to the Dominion. In homes and offices, schools and hospitals, people watched with a mix of horror and disbelief. Many thought it was some elaborate hoax, but now the ships were visible, dark silhouettes blotting out the stars. It was obviously real. "You have 72 hours to comply," Sear continued. "If you refuse, we will begin the systematic bombardment of your major cities. If you attempt to resist, we will show no mercy. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships cannot challenge our fleet. Accept your fate and live, or fight and die. The choice is yours." The broadcast ended. Sear leaned back in his command chair, pleased with himself. Now, we wait. 3 days, and this planet will kneel. But on Earth, something unexpected began to happen. In the first few hours after the broadcast, there was chaos, just as Sear had predicted. Panic in the streets, riots in some cities, and leaders around the world scrambled to react to a threat that no one had ever imagined. Military forces were placed on high alert, though everyone knew their weapons were useless against the alien fleet. But then, slowly at first, and then faster, something changed. The fighting stopped. Not just the panic in the streets, but the larger conflicts. Wars that had raged for years suddenly ceased. Enemies who had directed weapons at each other for generations lowered them. Political rivals who had spent decades attacking one another reached out to cooperate. An emergency session of the United Nations was called. Every nation sent representatives. And for the first time in human history, there were no arguments, no posturing, no political games. There was only one question: how do we survive this? The answer came from an unexpected place. Deep beneath a mountain in the American Southwest lay a facility that officially did not exist. It had been built in the 1960s, at the height of humanity's fears of alien contact. For decades, it had been staffed by scientists and military personnel who were preparing for the day everyone hoped would never come. That day had arrived. General Sarah Chen, commander of the facility, stood before a wall of screens showing the alien fleet. She was a short woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had spent her career preparing for this moment. "What do we have?" she asked her team. A scientist named Dr. James Morrison stepped forward. "We've been analyzing their ships since they arrived. Their technology is incredibly advanced, far beyond anything we can match. Their shields appear to be a kind of energy field that can absorb or deflect any projectile or explosive we can throw at them." "So we can't hurt them," Chen said sharply. "Not directly." "No," Morrison hesitated. "Speak freely, Doctor. We don't have time for hesitation. There may be ways to harm them indirectly. If we can get them out of their ships and onto the ground, they will be vulnerable. Our scans show that their soldiers wear armor, but it is designed for protection against energy weapons, not the kinetic force delivered by our weaponry." Chen considered this. "They want 30% of our population as slaves. That means they will eventually have to land. They can't control 8 billion people from orbit." "Exactly. And there is something else." Morrison pulled up a new display. "Their communications suggest they expect our quick capitulation. They have done this before with dozens of other worlds. Their entire strategy is based on the assumption that any intelligent species will submit when faced with overwhelming force." A grim smile crossed Chen's face. "Then they don't know humans very well." Over the next 72 hours, humanity did something that had never happened before in its history. Nations shared their most secret weapons and technologies. Enemies became allies overnight. Every resource, every scientist, every soldier was dedicated to one goal. They were not preparing to surrender. They were preparing to fight. But they were also preparing something else. A trap. When the deadline arrived, Sear confidently awaited news of the surrender. Instead, he received coordinates in the American desert and a simple message: "You wanted to meet humanity. Come down and meet us properly." Sear was surprised. The arrogance of these creatures was almost admirable. They truly thought they could challenge him. "This is obviously a trap," warned Virat. "Of course it is," Sear agreed. "But what trap could the primitives set for us? We will send ground forces, crush whatever resistance they have assembled, and make an example of them. After that, the rest of the planet will surrender quickly enough." He ordered 50 soldiers to land on the surface. It was the largest ground force he had ever deployed. Transport ships descended through the atmosphere, landing in the empty desert the humans had specified. Valoran soldiers spread out across the sandy terrain. Their weapons were ready, but there was nothing there. Only rocks, sand, and empty sky. The commander reported back to Seer. "Supreme Commander, there is no one here. The area is completely abandoned." Seer frowned. "Comb the perimeter. They must be hiding somewhere." The soldiers dispersed, scanning the desert with their advanced sensors. Nothing, not a single person in sight. Then, the ground began to shake. At first, the Valorans thought it was an earthquake, but the shaking intensified, and a terrible rumble filled the air. And then they saw it, rising from the horizon in all directions. Walls of fire. The humans had buried nuclear weapons beneath the desert. Dozens of them were placed in a perfect circle around the landing zone. They had invited the Valorans to this exact spot, knowing it was already doomed to destruction. The commander barely had time to scream before the nuclear fire consumed everything. Aboard his flagship, Seer watched in disbelief as his 50 soldiers were vaporized in an instant. The desert where they had landed was now a glowing crater of radioactive glass. They destroyed their own land," Virat stammered. "They poisoned their own soil to kill our soldiers." Seer stood frozen. His 4 eyes were wide with shock. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever done anything like this. Faced with overwhelming force, civilizations surrendered or fled. They did not sacrifice their own territory. They did not turn their world into a weapon. A new message came from Earth. A single sentence. That was just to get your attention. "Would you like to discuss terms now?" Seer's shock gave way to fury. These insects had killed 50 Valoran warriors. Such an insult could not go unpunished. "Forget about capture," he growled. "Forget about labor quotas. We will burn this world until nothing is left. Begin orbital bombardment of their major cities. Show them what happens when you defy the Dominion." Virat hesitated. "Supreme Commander, our orders were to capture the planet intact. If we destroy too much, our orders have changed," Seer interrupted, his voice cold with rage. "This species cannot be allowed to exist. They are too dangerous. We will exterminate them and take whatever resources remain." The Valoran fleet moved into combat formation. 500 warships positioned themselves over Earth's major population centers, their weapons charged with destructive energy. On the ground, humans looked at the darkening sky and knew what was coming. It was impossible to stop. No shield could protect them. The aliens were going to rain fire from above, and millions would die. But instead of despair, something else spread through the human population, something harder than fear. A defiance. If they were going to die, they would die fighting. If their cities were going to burn, they would ensure the enemy paid for every inch of ground. The nuclear trap had shown them something important. The aliens could be hurt. They could be killed. Their technology was superior, but they were not invincible. The first plasma beams hit Tokyo. The city burned. Millions of lives were lost in an instant. The destruction was unprecedented. Buildings were vaporized, streets melted. A metropolis that had stood for centuries was turned to ash in minutes. Then Beijing, then Moscow, then New York, then London. The Valorans watched from orbit as the greatest cities of humanity were destroyed. Surely now they will surrender. Surely now they will understand the futility of resistance. But the message of surrender never came. Instead, from the smoke and fire of the ruined cities, something rose that the Valorans had not expected. Ships. Human ships. They were crude and ugly, nothing like the elegant Valoran vessels. They looked like they had been welded together from scrap metal in desperation. But they flew, rising through the atmosphere on pillars of fire, heading straight for the alien fleet. "Impossible," Virat whispered. "They were supposed to be primitive. Where did these ships come from?" They came from secret programs that every major nation had run for decades. Black-budget projects hidden from the public, preparing for a threat that might never come. Ships built in underground hangars, armed with every weapon humanity could conceive. With crews of volunteers who knew they would likely not survive, the battle for Earth had begun. The first human ships reached the Valoran fleet and opened fire. Their weapons were primitive compared to plasma cannons, merely rockets and kinetic projectiles. But there were so many of them, and they kept coming and coming. Most of the rockets bounced harmlessly off the Valoran shields, but occasionally one found a weakness, a point where multiple impacts had weakened the energy field. And when human weaponry struck Valoran metal, it caused damage. The first Valoran ship exploded, torn apart by a barrage of rockets that should never have been able to touch it. The people watching from below cheered, even as their cities burned. Seer ordered his fleet to destroy the human ships. It should have been easy. The Valoran targeting systems were far superior, and their weapons were devastating. Human ships perished by the dozen, torn to pieces before they could get close. But for every human ship that fell, two more rose to take its place. And the pilots did not retreat. They did not flee. When their weapons were empty, they steered their ships straight at the Valoran vessels and accelerated. They turned themselves into weapons. The first suicide ram disabled a Valoran cruiser. A human pilot had steered his damaged ship straight into the enemy's bridge. The explosion killed thousands of Valorans and sent the cruiser spinning down into Earth's atmosphere. Virat stared at the tactical display, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. They are intentionally dying. They are killing themselves to hurt us. I can see that, Seer snapped. Destroy them. Destroy all of them. But the humans kept coming from every continent, from hidden bases all over the world. Ships rose to meet the invaders. They died in terrifying numbers. 3 or 4 human ships were lost for every damaged Valoran vessel, but they never stopped. A captured pilot, a human woman, was brought to Seer's flagship for questioning. She was young, her face was burned by radiation. One arm hung lifelessly at her side, but there was no fear in her eyes. Why do you fight? Seer demanded. You cannot win. Your ships are inferior. Your weapons are primitive. Every hour, thousands of your people die, while we lose only hundreds. Why do you continue? The pilot smiled, blood on her teeth. You think we're fighting to win? She said. Her voice was hoarse but firm. We're not fighting to win. We're fighting so the galaxy remembers the price of invading Earth. We're fighting so that in 1,000 years, any species that finds your records will think twice before attacking humans. She leaned forward. Her eyes burned with fierce determination. We are writing a warning in your blood, and we will keep writing it until there is not a single human left capable of holding a pen. Seer stared at her, and for the first time in his long career as a conqueror, he felt something he had never experienced before: fear. He had conquered dozens of worlds. He had faced enemies with advanced technology and massive armies. But he had never faced anything like this. Humans didn't fight like any other species. They didn't calculate the odds or measure the losses. They simply refused to stop. The pilot was taken away, but her words echoed in Seer's mind. He walked to the viewport and looked down at Earth. The planet was burning in a dozen places. Massive pillars of smoke rose from the ruins of its cities. By any rational measure, the humans were losing catastrophically. Their losses were massive, their infrastructure was collapsing, and yet they continued to fight. Seer thought of Elder Kaus and his warnings. He thought of the ancient records, the extinct civilizations, the recurring message over thousands of years. Do not wake the humans. He was beginning to understand that these creatures were not fighting a war. They were fighting extinction. And somewhere in their evolutionary history, they had learned that extinction could be delayed, even avoided, if you were willing to pay any price, absolutely any price. Seer made a decision that had never been made in the history of the Valoran Dominion. He opened a channel to the Galactic Conclave. This is Supreme Commander Seer. I need reinforcements. Send everything you can spare. There was a long pause before the reply came. Supreme Commander, you have 500 ships. You are attacking a primitive world. How could you possibly need reinforcements? Seer watched as another human ship crashed into a Valoran cruiser, taking both vessels down in flames. Because I was wrong, he said quietly. We were all wrong. This is not a primitive world. This is something else entirely. And if we don't finish this quickly, I am not sure we will be able to finish it at all. The battle continued to rage around Earth. Millions had died on both sides, and humanity, burning but unbroken, continued to fight through the fire. The warning had been ignored. Now, the Valorans were learning its meaning the hard way. 6 months had passed since the Valorans first appeared in Earth's skies. Half a year of constant war, of burning cities and falling ships. Deaths on a scale humanity could never have imagined. The numbers were terrifying beyond comprehension. Over 2 billion humans had died, either from orbital bombardment, ground combat, or the chaos and famine that followed the destruction of their civilization's infrastructure. And yet, humanity continued to fight. Supreme Commander Seer stood in the bridge of his flagship, looking at holographic maps showing Earth's surface. The planet looked scarred. Huge wounds of destruction crossed its continents. Dozens of major cities were reduced to ruins. Human governments had collapsed. Their capitals were destroyed. Their leaders were dead or scattered. By every measure important to military strategy, Earth should have surrendered months ago. Any rational species would have accepted defeat long ago. The losses were too great, the odds too impossible, but humans refused to be rational. Report, Sir ordered. Verot stepped forward. His face showed the exhaustion that now plagued all Valoran officers. The war that was supposed to last 1 month had dragged on indefinitely, and there was no sign of it ending. Our fleet has been reduced to 412 ships, Verot said. We have lost 88 vessels since the start of the invasion. Most were destroyed by suicide attacks or increasingly effective human ground-launched missiles. And the reinforcements I requested. Another 200 ships are en route. They should arrive within a week. Seer nodded, but his expression was grim. He had started with 500 ships against a planet with no space fleet. Now he needed 700 just to maintain control of orbital space. And what of the ground situation? He asked. Verot hesitated before answering. We control about 30% of the planet's surface, mostly areas we have pacified with heavy bombardment. But the humans have regrouped in the remaining territories. They have created new command structures, new supply lines, new weapons factories. He brought up a tactical display showing enemy positions. They are building ships faster than we expected, not just primitive vessels from the first weeks of the war. These are improved designs, incorporating technologies they have captured or reverse-engineered from our downed ships. Their weapons are becoming more effective. Their shields, though still primitive, are becoming stronger. Seer studied the display with growing unease. How is this possible? We destroyed their cities, their factories, their universities. Where are they getting the resources for all this? From everywhere, Verot said. They have converted every remaining factory to military production. They mine raw materials with hand tools if they have to. They train pilots on simulators built from salvaged equipment. Their entire surviving population is mobilized for the war effort. He paused, then added quietly, even their children are involved. We have captured resistance fighters as young as 12. They don't fight directly, but they work in factories, carry messages, help wounded soldiers. Their entire species has become a war machine. Seer thought about what Verot described. 8 billion humans before the war, 2 billion dead, 6 billion remaining, and all of them working toward one goal, the destruction of the Valoran invaders. It was unprecedented. In the entire history of the Dominion, no conquered species had ever shown this level of resistance. Most civilizations had a breaking point, a level of suffering that would force them to surrender. The humans, it seemed, had none. There is something else, Verot said. Something I think you need to see. He changed the display to show a city that had once been in Canada. The city was mostly destroyed, but the humans had built a new settlement in its ruins, a labyrinth of underground tunnels and fortified buildings. We captured this city 3 weeks ago, Verot explained. We called it New Toronto in our records. The humans who survived the bombardment were rounded up for labor duty. According to our initial plans, and Seer prompted. They killed every soldier we sent to guard them. Seer's 4 eyes narrowed. How did we disarm them? We took their weapons. They made new ones. Verot's voice was flat, as if he still couldn't quite believe what he was reporting. Kitchen knives, sharpened pieces of metal, clubs made of broken furniture, chemical mixtures from cleaning supplies that burned through our soldiers' armor. He brought up a recording from a surviving camera. It showed a hallway in a human building, filled with chaos. Valoran soldiers were fighting hand-to-hand against a crowd of humans. The humans were poorly armed. Many were wounded. Some could barely stand, but they kept coming, climbing over the bodies of the fallen to reach their enemies. They organized an uprising using hand signals and whispered codes, Verot continued. We had no warning. One moment, everything was quiet, and the next, 20,000 people attacked simultaneously throughout the city. In the recording, a middle-aged woman, gaunt from hunger, was seen stabbing a piece of broken glass into the neck joint of a Valoran soldier's armor. The soldier fell, and other humans swarmed him, tearing his armor apart with their bare hands. Our soldiers reported that the humans were smiling, Verot said quietly. Even as they were dying, even as our weapons mowed them down, they were smiling. One of our lieutenants sent a final transmission before he died. He said, "They just keep coming. We've killed hundreds, thousands. They just keep coming. And they're smiling. Why are they smiling?" Seer watched the recording in silence. The Battle of New Toronto had lasted 18 hours. When it ended, every Valoran soldier in the city was dead. The humans had suffered horrific losses, but they had won with kitchen knives and broken glass. "Withdraw our forces from all occupied cities," Seer ordered. "We cannot control the territory with ground troops. The humans are too unpredictable." Verot nodded. I reached the same conclusion. We must win this war from orbit. We must destroy their ability to fight without ever stepping foot on their world. It was the only rational strategy, but it meant a complete abandonment of the original plan. No labor quotas, no resource extraction. The war against Earth had turned into something else. It had become a war of attrition. On Earth, humanity knew this too. They saw the Valoran ground forces retreat. They saw the fleet repositioning for continued bombardment. They understood what was coming, and they prepared accordingly. In a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, the surviving leaders of Earth's nations held their final unified meeting. General Sarah Chen, who had become the de facto military commander of humanity's forces, stood before a wall of screens showing the positions of both fleets. "The enemy has abandoned the occupation," she announced. "They are going to try to destroy us from orbit, systematically bombarding every settlement until nothing is left." The faces around the table were grim but resolute. Presidents and generals, scientists and engineers, all of them had lost family and friends in the war. All of them were exhausted to their breaking point. None of them wanted to surrender. "What are our options?" asked the former president of Russia, a tired man with gray hair and haunted eyes. Chen brought up a new display. "We have been working on something, a project that integrates everything we have learned from captured Valoran technology with everything our best minds can develop." On the display were ships, but not like the primitive vessels that had fought in the first months of the war. These were sleeker, more advanced, not as elegant as Valoran ships, but clearly a step forward. "We call it the Phoenix Fleet." 57 ships built secretly in facilities around the world. Each carries weapons that can actually penetrate Valoran shields, based on reverse-engineered technology from downed enemy ships. 57 ships against more than 400, said the Chinese representative. "And they have reinforcements coming." "I know the numbers," Chen replied. "But these ships are better than anything we have ever put into space. And more importantly, our pilots are better than anything the Valorans have encountered." She looked around the table, meeting every gaze. "Our people have been fighting this war for 6 months. They have learned how to kill aliens with kitchen knives and homemade explosives. They have flown broken ships into the middle of enemy fleets. They have done things that should be impossible, simply because they refuse to admit defeat." Chen's voice turned hard with determination. "The Valorans think they understand war. They don't. They have conquered civilizations that surrendered when the odds were against them. They have never fought an enemy that doesn't know how to surrender. We will show them what that means." She laid out her battle plan. It was desperate, almost suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. 3 days later, the Phoenix Fleet was launched. 57 human ships rose from secret bases around the world, punching through the atmosphere in a coordinated attack. The Valorans immediately detected them and moved to intercept. "More suicide attacks," Seer said, watching the tactical display. "Haven't they learned? Destroy them." But these ships were different. When the Valoran weapons fired, the human ships dodged with unexpected skill. When plasma bursts struck their shields, the shields held longer than they should have. And when the human ships opened fire in return, their weapons pierced the Valoran defenses with deadly precision. The first Valoran cruiser fell within minutes, torn apart by rockets that knew exactly where to strike. Then another, and another. Seer watched in disbelief as his numerical advantage began to shrink. The humans weren't just fighting, they were winning individual battles. Their ships worked together with perfect coordination, covering each other, concentrating fire on damaged enemies, retreating when they were overwhelmed, only to attack again from another angle. "How?" Virat demanded. "How are they doing this?" The answer was simple, though the Valorans would not understand it until much later. Human pilots had spent months studying Valoran tactics, their patterns, identifying their weaknesses. They had trained on simulators until they could fly in their sleep. They had analyzed every battle of the war, every victory and defeat, and incorporated those lessons into their strategies. But more than that, they had something the Valorans lacked: desperation. Every human pilot knew that if they failed, their species would be destroyed. There was no surrender, no retreat, no second chance. They fought with the focused rage of people who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. The battle raged for hours. Human ships died, but so did Valoran ones. The casualty ratio, which had always been in the aliens' favor, began to even out. For every lost human vessel, a Valoran one perished too. When the Phoenix Fleet finally retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of 17 of their own ships, they had destroyed 31 Valoran vessels. It was the first clear human victory of the war. On Earth, people hiding in bunkers and ruins heard the news. For the first time in 6 months, there was hope. Real hope. The enemy could be defeated. Sear received the casualty reports with cold fury. 31 ships lost. 31 against primitives who hadn't even reached their moon when the war started. Reinforcements, he told Virat. When will they arrive? In 2 days, Virat replied. Contact the conclave. Tell them we need more. Tell them. Sear paused, searching for the words. Tell them Earth is a bigger threat than we expected. Much bigger. On Terra Prime, the galactic conclave received Sear's message with alarm. A primitive world had destroyed 88 ships. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Elder Cowis stood before the council once again. His ancient face showed no satisfaction, only weariness. You were warned, he said simply. I told you what the humans were capable of. I told you they would not surrender. I told you they would sacrifice everything just to avoid submission. The head of the council leaned forward. What do you propose we do now, Elder? Cowis was silent for a long time. I propose you consider a possibility that no one wants to discuss. The possibility that we cannot win this war, that every ship we send to Earth only delays the inevitable. That is absurd, a council member argued. We have thousands of ships across the Dominion. Earth has what? A few hundred at most? For now, yes, Chaos agreed. But think about what you have seen. 6 months ago, the humans had no space fleet at all. Now they have ships that can rival ours. They went from chemical rockets to energy shields in half a year. What will they be capable of in another 6 months? A year? 10 years? He gestured to the report from Earth. These creatures learn faster than any species we have ever encountered. They adapt. They improvise. For every weapon we use against them, they find a counter. For every tactic we employ, they develop a response. And they never stop trying. The council chamber went silent. There is an old Valoran saying, Chaos continued. Never wake a sleeping predator. We did worse. We not only woke the humans, we showed them that there are threats beyond their world. We gave them a reason to develop technologies they would have needed centuries to discover on their own. He turned to look directly at the council. By attempting to conquer Earth, we may have created exactly what we feared, a species that will not stop until either it is destroyed or we are. On Earth, General Chen stood among the wreckage of a destroyed city, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Valoran fleet was licking its wounds and preparing for the next assault. Somewhere behind them, reinforcements were coming. The war was far from over, but something had changed. For 6 months, humanity had fought for survival, hoping only to delay the inevitable. Now, for the first time, they were fighting for victory. Chen's communications officer approached. General, we received a message from our intelligence department. They have been tracking Valoran communications. The enemy is requesting more reinforcements, many more. Chen allowed herself a faint smile. Good. That means we're hurting them. There is something else, the officer continued. Our scientists have made a breakthrough. The captured Valoran technology has given them ideas. They think they can develop faster-than-light travel within the next few months. Chen's smile vanished, replaced by something harder, colder. Then the war won't stay in our solar system for long, she said quietly. Eventually, we will take it to them. She looked up at the stars again, at the distant points of light that had seemed so unreachable just a year ago. They came here to conquer us, to enslave us, to destroy us. They had no idea what they started. And now, they will learn what happens when you give humans a reason to reach for the stars. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and humanity was only just getting started. A year had passed since the first Valoran ships appeared over Earth. 12 months of fire and blood. Deaths on a scale that would have broken any other species. The human population had dropped from 8 billion to less than 4 billion. Half the species wiped out in 1 year of war. And yet, humanity was stronger than ever. The Phoenix fleet had grown from 57 to over 300 ships. Human factories, rebuilt from the ashes of ruined cities, ran day and night, producing weapons, armor, and spacecraft. Scientists who once competed for research grants now worked together in underground laboratories, pushing the boundaries of physics to develop new technologies. And they had finally achieved what once seemed impossible: faster than light travel. The first human ship to break the light barrier was called Defiance. It wasn't an elegant vessel. It was ugly and practical, built for war, not exploration. But when it activated its prototype FTL drive and vanished from Earth's orbit, appearing seconds later on the far side of the moon, a triumphant cry went up that was heard around the world. Humanity was no longer trapped. The galaxy was now within reach, but the war on Earth continued. The Valorans had sent reinforcements, increasing their fleet to more than 600 ships. They had learned from their early mistakes, adapting their tactics to counter human strategies. The battles in orbit became brutal and grueling. Both sides suffered heavy losses, and Supreme Commander Seer had changed over the year. The confident conqueror who had ignored Elder Kaus's warnings was gone. In his place stood a tired, haunted officer who had seen thousands of his soldiers die at the hands of an enemy that simply wouldn't surrender. "Report," he said. The word came out mechanically, from endless repetition. Verat, also exhausted, brought up the tactical display. The human fleet currently numbers approximately 312 combat vessels. Our fleet numbers 574 after last week's battle. Their technology continues to evolve. Their weapons are now nearly equal to ours in effectiveness. Their shields can withstand several direct hits from our plasma cannons. And their tactics. Verat shook his head. They are innovative in ways we cannot predict. In every battle they try something new. Seer stared at the display. The numbers were still in the Dominion's favor, but the gap was closing. A year ago, he would have laughed at the idea that humans could match Valoran technology. Now, it seemed not just possible, but inevitable. "Is there any news from the Conclave?" he asked. "Yes, they are concerned. Reports of our losses have spread throughout the Dominion. Other species are beginning to take notice." This was what Seer feared most. The Valoran Dominion ruled through the perception of invincibility. Hundreds of conquered species submitted because they believed resistance was futile. If they began to think otherwise, "What are they seeing?" Seer asked. Verat brought up a new display showing footage being broadcast across Dominion networks. Human battles, human victories, human ships ramming Valoran vessels, human soldiers fighting with impossible determination. "This footage has been circulating for months," Verat explained. At first, it was treated as entertainment, a curiosity look at how the primitives resist their inevitable conquest. But as the war dragged on, the tone changed. Species conquered for centuries are watching the human resistance, and they are asking questions. What questions? Questions like, if humans can fight the Dominion without experience and with primitive technology, what could we do with the knowledge gained under Valoran rule? Questions like, if we all rose up together, would the Dominion have enough ships to stop us all? Seer felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly what Elder Kaus had warned about. The humans weren't just fighting a war, they were inspiring a revolution across the galaxy. On a dozen conquered worlds, in secret meetings, the same scenes were playing out. The Katrani watched the footage of human pilots steering damaged ships into Valoran cruisers, sacrificing themselves to destroy the enemy. They remembered their own resistance, crushed 5,000 years ago, and wondered if things could have been different. The Varad, known for their mathematical minds, calculated the odds of a successful uprising. For centuries, the numbers had always favored submission, but now, with the Dominion fleet occupied at Earth, the equations were changing. Poets, artists, and musicians who had been forbidden from creating anything but propaganda for their masters began writing songs in secret. Songs about Earth, songs about resistance, songs about freedom. And the children of the Burning Star, an ancient species that the Dominion had nearly driven to extinction, watched the humans struggle and felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. On a small space station orbiting a gas giant, representatives of 12 conquered species met in secret. It was a huge risk. If the Valorans discovered this gathering, everyone present would be executed for treason. But some risks were worth taking. "We have all seen the footage," said the Katrani representative, a tall, insectoid being with wings folded behind its back. "The humans have held on for a year. They have destroyed hundreds of Valoran ships. They have developed technology that rivals that of our masters, and they show no signs of surrender. Moreover," added the Varad delegate, a small, furry creature with large eyes, "they have achieved faster-than-light travel. Our sources confirm that human ships were spotted outside their solar system for the first time. They are no longer just defending, they are exploring." "The question is," said the Zari artist, her voice sounding like music even in normal conversation, "what do we do about it?" The room went silent. Everyone knew what they wanted to do, but wanting and doing were very different things. If we rise up and fail, The Dominion will completely crush us, said the Varad. They have done it before. Entire species have been exterminated for much less. But if we do not act, the Katrani replied, we will remain slaves forever. We have watched others fight our battles for an entire year. How long can we continue to do nothing while humans die for a freedom that should belong to us too? The debate continued for hours. Fear argued with hope. Caution argued with bravery. But in the end, a decision was made. They would contact the humans. The message was sent through a network of smugglers and spies, passing through relay stations across the galaxy to avoid detection by the Valorans. It was simple and direct. People of Earth, we are the conquered species of the Valoran Dominion. We have watched your war with admiration and hope. We offer our support, our knowledge, and our alliance. Together, we can end the tyranny that has oppressed us all. Please respond. On Earth, the message arrived at a communications facility that had been hastily built on the ruins of New York. The technicians who received it stared at their screens in disbelief. General Chen, one of them shouted, you need to see this. Chen read the message 3 times before she allowed herself to believe it. Allies, real allies from inside the enemy empire. It changed everything. She carefully composed a reply, knowing it would be one of the most important messages in human history. To the conquered peoples of the Valoran Dominion, we accept your message with gratitude and brotherhood. We did not ask for this war, but we will bring it to an end. We fight not only for Earth, but for everyone who suffers under tyranny. Send us what you can. We will put it to good use. And when the time comes, we will fight alongside you. The Dominion's days are numbered. This is our promise. Humanity is with you. The alliance was formed in secret. Information and resources flowed between Earth and the Dominion subject worlds. Conquered species shared what they knew about Valoran technology, tactics, and weaknesses. They provided star maps, access codes, and intelligence on fleet movements. In return, the humans shared something even more valuable. They shared their defiance. Training videos showed human soldiers how to fight against superior enemies. Strategic documents explained how to organize resistance cells, how to sabotage infrastructure, how to survive under occupation. And through it all lay a simple message that resonated with every species. You are not defeated until you decide to be. As long as you refuse to surrender, as long as you keep fighting, you cannot truly be conquered. The Dominion ruled through fear. Show them you are not afraid, and their power will begin to crumble. On Valoran-controlled worlds, small acts of resistance began to multiply. Factory workers slowed down production. Transportation systems suffered mysterious breakdowns. Supplies intended for the fleet at Earth were delayed or went missing. Nothing was dramatic enough to trigger retaliation, but the cumulative effect was significant. And then the humans arrived. The first human ship to reach a conquered world was Defiance, the same vessel that had first achieved faster-than-light travel. It dropped out of hyperspace in orbit around the Katrani colony, appearing without warning in the middle of a Valoran patrol. The Valoran ships immediately opened fire, but Defiance was faster and more maneuverable than they expected. It dodged their weapons, fired back with deadly precision, and destroyed 2 patrol vessels before vanishing back into hyperspace. It was a hit-and-run attack, over in minutes, but its impact was immense. The humans had come. The legends, the stories, the footage they had watched for a year were exciting, but distant. Now it was real. The humans were no longer just defending their world. They were taking the fight to the Dominion. On the Katrani colony, crowds gathered in the streets. The Valoran garrison tried to disperse them, but the mood had shifted. People who had been afraid to speak now screamed their defiance. The fear that had kept them in obedience for centuries was cracking at the seams. Similar scenes played out across the Dominion as human ships appeared and vanished, striking Valoran targets and disappearing before retaliation could come. Every attack was small, more symbolic than strategic, but the symbolism mattered. The galaxy had watched Earth. Now, Earth was watching back. Supreme Commander Seer received the reports with growing horror. The war was spreading beyond his control. What had started as a simple conquest had turned into something much larger, much more dangerous. We must end this, he told the Conclave in an emergency transmission. We must focus everything we have and crush Earth before the rebellion spreads further and leaves our other territories undefended. The head of the council demanded, there are already uprisings on 3 worlds. If we pull our fleets to Earth, we could lose the entire Dominion. It was an impossible situation. Fight the humans and lose the Empire. Defend the Empire and let the humans grow stronger. Every option led to disaster. Elder Kaus, who had been watching the argument from the shadows, spoke for the last time. "There is one option you haven't considered," he said. The council turned to look at him. "Peace," Kaus said simply. "End the war. Withdraw troops from Earth. Negotiate with the humans." The reaction was immediate and violent. Peace with the primitives after all the blood spilled? It was unthinkable. "We will look weak," argued the head of the council. "Every conquered species will see it as a call to revolt." "They are already revolting," Chaos pointed out. "And they will continue to do so as long as humans show them it is possible. But if we make peace, if we acknowledge humans as equals rather than enemies, we will change the equation. The humans will have no reason to support the rebellion. The conquered species will have no human allies to inspire them." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We made a mistake by attacking Earth. We woke something that should have been left sleeping. Now we must live with the consequences. We can spend the next century fighting a war that will destroy the Dominion, or we can swallow our pride and make a different choice." The council argued for days. In the end, they rejected Chaos's proposal. The Dominion would not surrender. The Dominion would not show weakness. The war would continue until Earth was destroyed, regardless of the cost. Chaos nodded sadly and left the hall. He had done all he could. The rest was out of his hands. On Earth, General Chen received news of the council's decision through her spy networks. "They won't stop," she told her commanders. "They will keep throwing ships at us until one of us is destroyed." "Then we must ensure it is them," said Admiral Rodriguez, commander of the Phoenix Fleet. Chen nodded slowly. For a year, humanity had fought a defensive war, protecting their world from invasion. But they had always known that defense alone would not win the war. Eventually, they would have to take the fight to the enemy. The time had almost come. She looked at the stars, at the galaxy that had seemed so unreachable just 2 years ago. So much had changed, so much had been lost. But humanity had also gained something: purpose, unity, the knowledge that they were not alone in their struggle. "Contact our allies," she ordered. "Tell them to prepare. We are going to end this war, and when we do, we will make sure that no one ever forgets the price of threatening Earth." The final phase was about to begin. 2 years had passed since the first Valoran ships appeared over Earth. 2 years of war that had turned humanity from a species that had barely reached its moon into a force threatening the greatest empire in the galaxy. The price was beyond imagination. 4 billion people had died. Cities that had stood for centuries were now radioactive craters. The planet itself was scarred, its climate disrupted by years of bombardment and nuclear fire. But humanity had survived, and it had grown strong. The human fleet now numbered over 500 ships, built in secret facilities around the world and on the moon. Each vessel was a product of desperation and genius, combining captured Valoran technology with human innovation. They weren't elegant, but they were lethal, and they were no longer alone. Ships from 12 previously conquered species had joined the human fleet, forming the first true alliance against the Valoran Dominion. The Katrani brought their expertise in Valoran tactics. The Varad contributed their mathematical minds for strategic planning. The Zari provided communication technology that could not be intercepted. And the children of the Burning Star, who had the most reason to hate the Dominion, brought a fury that rivaled humanity's own. Together, they called themselves the Liberation Fleet. General Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the human flagship Unconquered, looking at the holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. 2 years ago, this fleet would have been science fiction. Now, it was reality. "Status report," she ordered. Admiral Rodriguez, her deputy, stepped forward. "All ships in position. 512 human vessels, 347 allied ships. Total combat strength, 859 ships." Chen nodded. It was the largest fleet ever assembled against the Dominion, but it was still outnumbered. The Valorans had concentrated more than 1,000 ships at their home world, Terra Prime, knowing the humans would eventually come. "And our intelligence confirmed it," Rodriguez continued. "The Dominion fleet is positioned in a defensive sphere around Terra Prime. They expect us to attack in one wave, trying to break their lines, which is exactly what we will not do." Chen turned to the Allied commanders who had joined her on the bridge. "Today, we show the galaxy what happens when free peoples stand together. Today, we end the Dominion." The battle plan had been in development for months. It wasn't a simple attack. It was a coordinated strike on multiple fronts. designed to exploit every weakness the Alliance had discovered during the war. The fleet jumped into hyperspace. When they appeared at Terra Prime, the Valoran defenders were ready. More than 1,000 warships were aligned in perfect formation. Their weapons were charged, and their shields were raised. In their center was the flagship of Supreme Commander Seer, the largest ship in the Valoran fleet. Seer watched the approaching enemy fleet with grim determination. He had been fighting the humans for 2 years. He had lost friends, soldiers, and most of his original fleet. But he would not lose this battle. The future of the Dominion depended on it. "All ships, prepare for combat," he ordered. "Here, we will stand until the end." The Liberation fleet dispersed as it approached, breaking into smaller groups that seemed random but were, in fact, carefully planned. The Valorans, seeing the apparent disorder, moved forward to attack what they thought were isolated targets. It was a trap. The dispersed human groups weren't random. They were bait, luring the Valoran ships out of their defensive formation. And when the Dominion fleet scattered to pursue them, the real attack began. A second wave of ships dropped out of hyperspace behind the Valoran lines. These were smaller, faster, heavily armed vessels, piloted by crews who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war. Their target wasn't the enemy fleet, but the supply stations and communication complexes that supported it. Within minutes, the Valorans were cut off from their supplies and their ability to coordinate. Ships that had been working together were suddenly alone, unable to communicate with their commanders. "Regroup!" Seer shouted, but his orders were lost in the chaos of jammed communications. The Liberation fleet struck hard. Human ships, fighting side by side with their alien allies, slammed into the broken Valoran formation. The Catrani targeted engines and weapons systems with surgical precision. The Varad ships coordinated attacks with mathematical accuracy, and the humans did what they always did. They fought as if they had nothing to lose. The battle for Terra Prime lasted 18 hours. It was the bloodiest clash in galactic history, with ships dying by the hundreds on both sides. The space around the Valorans' home world turned into a graveyard of burning wreckage and floating debris. But slowly, inevitably, the Liberation fleet began to gain the upper hand. Valoran ships were falling faster than they could be replaced. Their formation, once impenetrable, was now broken into dozens of isolated groups, desperately fighting for survival. And as each group was destroyed, the others lost hope. Seer watched from the bridge as his fleet was torn apart around him. The tactical display showed hundreds of his ships destroyed, hundreds more damaged or disabled. The Liberation fleet had suffered heavy losses too, but they kept coming relentless. "Like a tide, Supreme Commander," Virat said, his voice numb with shock. "We have lost. We have to surrender." Seer was silent for a long time. Surrender. In 10,000 years, no Valoran force had ever surrendered. The very concept was alien to their culture. But as he watched another group of his ships perish under human weaponry, he realized the alternative was worse. Total annihilation. The end of everything his people had built. "Signal them," he said quietly. "All ships, cease fire. We surrender." The guns fell silent. For a long moment, nothing moved. The ships that had been in combat drifted apart. Their crews were stunned by the sudden peace. Then, slowly, the Liberation fleet began to regroup around the defeated Dominion. General Chen received the news of the surrender without triumph. Too many had died for joy, but there was satisfaction cold and furious. They had done it. They had won. Her shuttle made the trip to Seer's flagship, accompanied by an honor guard of human marines. The Valoran vessel was damaged. Its hull was scarred by battle, but it was still functioning. She walked through its corridors, surrounded by her soldiers, past Valoran crew members who looked at her with a mix of fear and disbelief. She found Seer in his command center, standing amidst the wreckage of his dreams. He looked older than his years, broken in a way that went beyond physical wounds. "Supreme Commander Seer," Chen said. Her voice was steady. "Your fleet is shattered. Your empire is collapsing. Do you have anything to say?" Seer turned to her, this small woman, a human with scars on her face and a prosthetic arm, who had done what no enemy had ever managed. She had brought the Dominion to its knees. "Your elder warned you," Chen said before he could speak. "You should have listened." Seer nodded slowly. "Yes, I should have. But we were arrogant. We thought our technology made us invincible. We didn't understand that true strength comes from something else entirely." He looked at her with something like respect. "What now?" Chen's expression did not soften. The Dominion is over. Your conquered species will be freed. Your fleet will be disbanded. Your worlds will be governed by councils representing all the people you enslaved. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But you, personally, will not see it. You ordered the death of 4 billion people. You burned our cities. You killed our children. There will be no prison, no exile, no mercy. Seer accepted this with a slow nod. He had expected nothing else. Humans were many things, but they were not forgiving. Before you carry out the sentence, he said, may I send one last message to the Conclave, to all the worlds that are watching this war? Chen thought for a moment, then nodded. Seer activated the broadcast system, knowing his words would be heard across the galaxy. This is Supreme Commander Seer of the Valoran Dominion. I am speaking now to everyone watching, to my people, to the species we conquered, to all the worlds that saw this war unfold. He paused, gathering his thoughts. 2 years ago, we attacked a small blue world in the outer spiral arm of the galaxy. We believed it would be an easy conquest. The inhabitants were primitive. Their technology was crude. They were constantly fighting among themselves. We thought they were nothing. His voice grew heavier. We were wrong. We were so terribly wrong. We thought we were conquering a primitive world. We were declaring war on the most successful predator in the universe. We woke something that should have been left sleeping. And now, we are paying the price. He looked directly into the recording device. To anyone who hears this message, I offer a warning. The same warning our elder gave us, which we foolishly ignored. Do not attack Earth. Do not threaten humanity. Do not give them a reason to turn their eyes toward your world. They are friendly, these humans. They are capable of kindness and cooperation. They will trade with you, work with you, perhaps even become your allies. But if you threaten them, if you try to conquer them, if you give them a reason to fight, he shook his head slowly, then